Nice!
Smell those emulsion fumes. Never used to be like this.
Hey, Marcus. Your father thinks it's Imulsion that's killing Sarah, right?
Yeah. We killed to get the stuff. And now it's killing us.
Yo, Marcus, we got grubs! Up the highway!
Welcome to another video delving into the world of gears. Today's topic, if you couldn't tell by the title, is the infectious fuel source that nearly wiped out all living things on the planet Sarah. Today we are going to talk about where Lambency comes from, how it works, and what happened to the lambent creatures after being infected. This is going to be the first warning I've ever put on a video. Gears is already gory and mature from the get-go, but today we're not simply summarizing a warfront or displaying a gun with a chainsaw on it, but we'll be talking about the brutal and sometimes squirmy nature of the lambent infection. If you're just a little bit more on the squeamish side, this is your fair warning now. Get out. Or just turn the volume off and play the video anyways while you go to the other room to fold laundry or something. We both know you need to get it done anyways, might as well. But without further ado, let's get right into it. 100 years before Emergence Day, before the fighting between the UIR and COG had even begun, Imulsion was discovered deep within the crusts of Sarah. While not very well understood, many scientists worked with the volatile liquid until one, Dr. Helen Cooper, created the light mass process, a procedure in which emulsion was converted into a highly efficient fuel source. This newfound bank of near-limitless energy fueled by emulsion is what kicked off the gold rush and shortly after, the Pendulum Wars, as nations fought for control of this nearly priceless source of energy after most other forms of production had run dry for the people of Sarah. For a few years after emulsion went into a state of high production, everything was great for some like the Coalition, who sat on a massive surplus of the fuel source. But eventually a sickness born from elongated exposure to emulsive fumes was sent to one Dr. Niles Sampson. This is when the New Hope research facility was set up. Niles and other researchers set out to investigate the cause and develop a cure to the sickness, now known as rust lung. Coughing fits until the sick began to throw up their own blood, slowly dying with a 100% fatality rate. Most died within months. Some could live decades. It was unknown at the time, but rust lung is actually the first stage of lambency, shown in many of the human miners, most often those who worked directly at emulsion refineries. I also feel it's important here to make this distinction. Emulsion is the name of the actual material, the oil and the fuel, the glowing liquid. Lambency is the semi-living fungal infection that is born of incredible emulsion exposure, specifically exposure to the fumes. Where the line is drawn between living emulsion and lambent creatures is a hard one, whether the liquid itself is alive. Adam Phoenix seems to think so, but it almost acts as a virus, not really alive and moving, but rather just occupying another living being's body in order to spread its own makeup across the world. Imagine if every time you smelt gasoline, pumping your car at the gas station, you got a little chance of an infection. Now imagine working at a facility where gasoline fumes were rampant and all of those working around them would slowly be given an incurable, painful disease. This is how common and infectious rust lung was at the beginning of the Pendulum Wars, and it would only get worse through decades of Saran society being powered off the back of emulsion. This of course lasted for some time until Mira was born, a child of the infected who was immune to the course of rust lung. At the same time, Niles developed a new goal in a secretive laboratory underneath New Hope and crafted the bulk of the Locust Horde from the children of these rust lung afflicted miners, with a dash of genetic experimentation. Born of the emulsion sickness and living in the hollows beneath Sarah where contact with emulsion was a day-to-day part of life, the Locusts were first to develop the later stages of lambency. Moving past rust lung and developing into a physical takeover of the body, at first it was hard to spot. Lambent drones and wretches not looking too far off from their natural counterparts aside from a glowing internal body and a volatile death. But the infection only got worse from there. Eventually the Locust began to turn lambent en masse. Fighting erupted in the hollows, and the Locusts were losing. In the short contacts they made, Adam Phoenix promised to cure the Lambent infection on behalf of Queen Mira, but could not do so in a short enough time to keep her satiated. Instead, Mira and her general, Uzil Ram, would invade the surface world so that they could flee the Hollow and the Lambent who threatened their civilization. Lambency was kept on its heels for quite some time from here on, and didn't make any crazy adjustments to life on Serra, especially in the backdrop of the Locust Wars against humanity. So much so that Lambent infection was not widespread public knowledge until at least 14 years after emergence. First, only a few rumors became widespread as reports of glowing wretches began to come through. The second big wave of Lambency came through after the detonation of a light mass missile in the Outer Hollow at the end of Gears of War 1, evaporating swaths of Imulsion instantly and expelling tons of the fumes into the air, leading to a small epidemic of rust lung cases in 15 years after emergence. Then finally the news broke, when Delta came to New Hope and learned of Niles' experiments, revealing secrets hidden by Prescott to all of the COG. Lambency truly started to show. Operation Hollowstorm brought Gears right into the crossfire between the Locust and the Lambent at Nexus, finally confirming the effect of Lambency on Locust, but yet to see any signs of it within the human race. All Locusts were capable of turning Lambent at this point, which is what gave the COG the idea of turning a Locust Brumok Lambent in order to destroy the Jacinto seawall and flood the Inner Hollow, where the nexus of the Horde was. This move was destructive and twofold in results. Firstly, and most urgent to the COG at the time, the flooding of Jacinto scattered and destroyed most of the Locust Horde, sending them away from their home and out into a broken world. Secondly, it also allowed lakes of Imulsion underneath the crust of Serra to rise up and saturate the soil of the planet deeply with Imulsion. This drastic transformation of the surface is what jump-started the Lambent infection into overdrive. Mutations started to writhe and move faster than ever before, affecting locusts of all kinds and other animals on the planet. Dogs, cats, other sea life, leviathans, and more variants of the Horde were overtaken by this Lambent infection and stripped of their autonomy. As creatures who have turned Lambent have no will to survive, no need to feast or drink, but merely an urge to kill and spread the infection further. At this point in time, roughly 17 years after the Locust emergence, just about everything and everyone on Serra was afflicted by Lambency. The beginning stages, at least. Think of the virus in The Walking Dead. Everyone is infected, but it's just a matter of time. Mutations in the Locust got worse too. Tendrils and cracks in their flesh making room for the excess in Imulsion within their bodies turned regular drones and grenadiers into fully fledged monsters. Butcher-class boomers wielding cleavers would be transformed into gunkers, the steel weapons they carried absorbed into the flesh of their arms. Massive pools of Imulsion launched from the other arm to cause damage and further infect others around. The first symptom of the Lambent species were polyps, small crab-like cyst-borne creatures that hunted in packs. Born off of the literal corpses and the Lambent flesh of other beings, often being seen launched from dredges, gunkers, the Lambent leviathan, and stalks. Polyps are less of a lethal threat and more like a spore with legs, spreading the infection by spewing swaths of Imulsion at their targets or by lodging into a creature, human, locust, or otherwise, and digging into their flesh, writhing within and taking over their host's body to become yet another grunt for the Lambent hive. The second main form of transportation for the Lambent were the stalks, living branches that sprouted from the ground and launched Imulsion fumes and spores into the air, infecting the surrounding areas and soil all around, turning the skies nearby into a barren wasteland, uninhabitable to all living things. Growing pods off of their sides, stalks would launch Lambent locust and polyps all over Serra, forcing most remnants of humanity to flee the mainland and seek shelter anywhere they could find it, but even the oceans of Serra were not safe from the Lambent scourge. Other Lambent mutations included formers, infected humans in emulsion-rich cities like Mercy, Char, and Halvo Bay saw these sprout first after the Lambent pandemic went global. Patients of rust lung got worse and began going into coughing fits and developing a fever until even the human race started to go lambent. The skin peeling back and turning a dead black hue as if they were charred, burned alive from the inside by the emulsion literally coursing through their veins as it overtook their body. Drudges would appear, the husks of locust corpses puppeted by Lambency, the longest lived of infected drones that became even more twisted, their bodies developing massive growths and tendrils, and were even more prone to mutations out on the field, resulting in hundreds of different drudge breeds throughout all of Serra's surface. Even the toughest locust were not immune. Berserkers with their impenetrable skin would be afflicted, their armored carapace and body cracking and sprouting spider-like tendrils just as all the others. Their stomach swelling with a grand body of emulsion, making them less bulletproof but still deadly as they retained the speed and strength of regular berserkers but now would just go on to expel emulsion fumes as they ran around. Some of the most drastic Lambent evolutions occurred around the Leviathans, massive, sea-dwelling creatures that were made of all different sizes. But the infected of these kinds, most likely exposed to emulsion through cracks in the Serra's surface at the bottom of the ocean or within the depths of lakes underground in the hollow, were massive in size after infection. Multiple hanging tentacles as a regular Leviathan might have, but now launching polyps to spread Lambency. Glowing eyes now flooded with emulsion. Such a massive beast would explode in dramatic fashion when killed. This also applied to Locust Brewmox. While we only ever see a single one, a Lambent Broodmock mutated and transformed with snapping tendrils and a sloped jaw, combined with the force from the Hammer of Dawn, is what the Kong used to break the Jacinto seawall and flood the inner hollows. While the Lambent are not intelligent, they are implied to possess a kind of hive mind. Born from infected miners, this is probably where the similar Locust hive mind with Queen Mira and later the Swarm originates. But this close genetic composition would also be the Locust's downfall. As previously mentioned, before Mira invaded the surface world, she would give Adam Phoenix a chance to cure them of Lambency, but he couldn't make it happen. Even after 7 years of development from the time he was kidnapped by Prescott and taken to Azura, Adam could not do enough to make his countermeasure device separate the Locust gene from Lambency, meaning that by destroying all Lambent cells on Serra, all of their emulsion, the Locust race would be killed with it, their chemical makeup too dependent on that relation to Lambency from the very origins of their species. And this is the legacy of the Lambent Plague, a fuel source that was a godsend for the human race, later becoming the precipice for the two greatest wars across the face of the planet, killing the Locust species and decades of their cultures, afflicting animals all across the world, and eliminating nearly 99% of the human race by the end of it. From the origins to first infections, from developments in the killing of Lambent cells planet-wide, this is what emulsion had done to Serra. What Lambency was to the people and creatures of the world, this is what the Lambent were. Thank you very much for watching. This is probably going to be the last Gears of War lore-focused video for a little while, but please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know down below if you enjoy this, and maybe I will drum something else up in the meantime. But other than that, I'm going to start focusing my attention to a few different projects. Thank you very much for watching. Have fun, stay cool, and be awesome. Buster out.